Welcome to Buckets. My name is Brandon Anderson. I am your host today here with Jim Turvey. Our first time, just me and Jim on the Buckets podcast feed after about 1,000 hours of text messages back and forth all this time. Excited to bring you today's episode. This is your Friday play-in preview for the 8 seed. I'll give you a preview and picks for those games just real quick, and then look ahead to what happens when those teams play in the first round against the 1 versus 8 series. Give you a quick little contingency playoff preview. Obviously, we don't know exactly which team it will be yet, but we're headed to the weekend. This to me is maybe the best NBA weekend, one of them. We get all the game ones. Saturday, there's 4. Sunday, there's 4. The games we're talking about today will both be Sunday since they're both playing Friday. So we have the whole feed of Buckets is like full of episodes for you this week. Earlier in the week, Matt Moore and I gave out our series previews for 2 of the other series. By the way, importantly here, Matt Moore, I'm filling in for Matt today. Matt is dealing with a family health emergency. Obviously, all of us in the Buckets family keep Matt and his family in our thoughts and prayers today. So Matt will be back soon, we hope. In the meantime, check out those series previews with Matt. We had a John T. Porter emergency podcast yesterday up in the feed. We will have for you a mega pod coming sometime Friday with all the game 1 best bets from the whole Buckets crew, all the series best bets from the whole Buckets crew. Jim, I know your picks are already on there for both of those, and we're getting the rest of those in the next couple days. It's all there, right? It's all there. And then obviously once we get into the games, probably a bit more of a traditional Buckets flow starting next week. So yeah, I guess I see why Matt's intros are so long. I have a lot of intro to give out too. As always, we are presented by BetMGM, the king of sports books. So those are the odds we will be using today. And let's get into our play-in games. Jim, we finally get to have our own podcast. Happy to have you here, buddy. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I know it is like I can't. We've only potted even with others only a handful of times. So this is truly the tech screen come to life. So I'm really excited. You and I go real deep in the weeds in the text chain, and I think we'll bring some of that text chain banter to this podcast here, and it's great to be on. Yeah, definitely seconding your thoughts for Matt though.
Absolutely. Well, Friday night's games are both 1.5 point lines as of right now. In fact, we have 8 games priced right now because obviously we don't have the games yet for these 2 for the weekend. Out of our 8 games, 6 games are priced within a bucket. So what a time to be alive. We got coin flip games all over the place. I think that's fun. It's fun as a fan that we get a lot of uncertainty. We don't know. We get a lot of fun matchups. It's fun but hard as a bettor. We get some tough reads on these close matchups here. So obviously in the East for the 8 seed, we have Bulls at Heat -1.5, Miami favored at home there. And then in the West, the finale, Kings at Pelicans. Pelicans home and the higher seed, but Kings are the -1.5 favorite there. So as always, we'll start out with our best bets for those games, and we'll get into it. Jim, what are your best bets for Friday night?
Yeah, well, these 2 games have 2 pretty notable injuries that the 2 of the teams from the Pelicans from the 7 spot, the Heat from the 8 spot have to be dealing with. And so for those, I'm going to player props that for players who will be soaking up some of that potential usage. I'm going to go Jaime Jaquez over 16.5 points and assists. And actually, I forgot, I changed one out. So this is not actually a Pelicans one, but instead a Kings one. I'm going Keon Ellis over 16.5 points plus rebounds plus assists.
Keon Ellis, Mr. Play-In himself, my man, with a huge game the other night. All right, I'm coming in with a couple of picks here too, and I'm just going to come up front with it. These are courtesy of our guy, Joe Delera, pointed these out to me and gave me a few options, and I jumped on them here. So give me, speaking of Mr. Play-In, give me Kobe White. Kobe with a huge game, 42 against the Atlanta Hawks. Doesn't really count because it's the Hawks and doesn't count because it's a play-in. But give me Kobe, escalator on the threes. So over 2.5 threes. Joe, by the way, said to make sure to use the word escalator on this one. So over 2.5, 4 more threes plus 225, 5 or more plus 650. And then in the night game, give me just Pels first half. I don't know if I feel great about it. I'm going to tread in lightly on that one, but we'll get that in a second. Let's start with Bulls versus Heat. Like you said, we got some injuries, unfortunately, from our game last night as we were recording. Jimmy Butler, he is out. He will not be playing here. MCL injury in that knee. We saw it happen in the game. Per Shams, he is out multiple weeks. I have to assume Jimmy Butler is probably done for the season at this point, given the outlook for the Heat. Terry Rozier possibly out. Duncan Robinson possibly out. We're missing some guys. Alex Caruso got his ankle stepped on. I think he actually sprained the other ankle, he said, trying to stabilize himself from the first ankle step. So the good news is just before we're starting to record, as of Thursday mid-afternoon, the latest update is that the swelling is down. He is now a game time decision, so it's possible he may end up playing. Don't forget, Zach LaVine is out. Pat Williams is out. Lonzo Ball is out. There are more guys not playing in the play-in game than there are guys actually playing in the play-in game. So you are on a prop here playing all those injury angles. Somebody's got to do stuff, and you think it's the rookie.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think Tyler Hero is going to get up about 45 shots this game, but I'm going to be looking to Jaime Jaquez. He is a rookie, but you forget when you watch him play because he kind of has a little bit of Jimmy Butler game to him. He has that kind of keeps you off balance. It's not the flashiest. He kind of is in the right spots. He seems really like a very smart basketball player, really impressive for a player his age. And he has soaked up some of that usage when Jimmy has missed time in the past. He's also done very well against Chicago this season. They've played each other 4 times. 3 of those 4 times he scored 18 or more points. 3 of those games he's had 4 or more assists. So I'm targeting the combination of what I think is a very good matchup with a player who appears to be ready for the moment. Watching the game last night, he was the best player to come off the bench. Haywood Highsmith got even more minutes than him, but they're going to need both of them tonight now, or on Friday now. And so, it's a combination of a player in a spot where they're going to need him. He looks like he's up for it, and a matchup that he's had success in during the season. I'm going to keep it simple. He's a guy who I'm always trying to bet on. Joe Dallaire was, we were right in those Jaime Jaquez bets for a while there during the middle of the season when the Heat had injury stuff before. We're going to go back to the well again here for Jaquez over points plus assists specifically.
Yeah, what I like about Jaquez here also is that he's not going to be intimidated by this one-off elimination setting. This is who Jaime Jaquez is. He did that at UCLA. They made the Final Four run as this huge underdog, and he was great along the way there. So I think if anything, like throw the rookie tag out the window. Like this dude's going to be ready to go, ready to play. So I like that. Kobe White, I mean, look, we saw it happen. Quibble over the most improved thing if we want. Not my pick there, but he got up a lot of shots. He's looking awesome. 42 against Atlanta. In the season series, he had 39 3-point attempts across the 4 games. So that was up from his usual averages, about 10 a game there. So over 2.5 threes, getting his shots up. And then the escalator, plus 225 for a fourth, plus 650 if he gets 5 or more. Maybe this is just Kobe White's week. Maybe this is the time for him to really announce himself and get some buckets. The Bulls do seem like they have a little bit more offensive firepower here with Jimmy Butler out. But I don't know, the Heat bench guys, like they showed up, they were doing stuff. The bench was really big. And I honestly thought they were going to get them over the line there, but came up short in the end. I always want to pick a side, especially here where one team's going home. I'm in Chicagoland. I feel like I got to make a Bulls pick one way or the other. So I will note this: Chicago started the season 5-14, and 14th loss was in the in-season tournament, I think, to end it. The very next game, I believe, they won in overtime. Since then, they're 35-28. That's not terrible, right? That's like,
well, I'll tell you something else. And it's not just picking a very specific date. That's the date Zach LaVine went out to injury, and they have played much better without LaVine than they have played with him. And I'll say, I don't have a specific bet on this game, but that's in part because, a lot of us action folks are going to have a nice little sweat here with our Miami Heat to miss the playoffs bet that we were on so egregiously hard at the beginning of the season. It's looking great now. And so I'm kind of letting that ride as a way of betting on the Bulls, because if I didn't have any action, in the futures market on it, I would definitely lean towards the Bulls here. Although I will say this just feels like the most Miami game to win. Everyone out, no offense possible, just grimy, slimy, spo basketball. But I definitely, if I'm able to kind of remove myself from that, I definitely do think the Bulls, who have been playing, kind of decent since Levine went out, I think that kind of allowed Kobe White to improve, at least on the surface. And and I definitely would take their side if I had no priors on the line here.
Yeah, that's basically where I'm at also, and why I'm not playing the game is it feels like a Bulls win here, but I literally have in my notes, this feels like the heatiest heat culture that ever cultured game, right? Like
Yeah.
a home game as effectively the underdog. Like I know the spread is in their favor, and I wouldn't be shocked if it closed with them not favored, depending on where the money comes. But they're gonna play the underdog role with Butler out, and like we continue to see that Eric Spoelstra is as much of a weapon in a one-off, one-game setting. Like you don't know what they're going to throw at the Bulls, what sort of zone or what they'll come up with. He will have a plan. Like this is not a team that's going to be like, well, Jimmy's out, I guess we're done here. Like that's what will happen with a normal team where the star is out. That's not what the Heat are going to do here. So yeah, I got one more line for you here, and then we'll get out of on this game. Over under 0.5. Andre Drummond sabotages another teammate. What do you got?
I'm gonna I'll go under for today. He had some life in him. He was getting the crowd going last game. I think he and Chicago are kind of a good fit. He did have that elite meme. But I was having fun watching him play. It's nice to see him. They're talking on the broadcast about how it's such a sucker story, but there are always these veterans who figure out what they really need to be doing on the court to succeed. I am a sucker for that. He's playing his role well. So I think he could be a factor, and he had a real nice block at the rim last night too. He's for all the crap we've given him over the years, he's not as terrible as I think he is made to be at times.
Yeah, he's also only like 30 years old somehow, even though it seems like he's been playing for like 15 seasons already. I'm obviously referring to the Torrey Craig, like tried to do the alley-oop the last week of the season. And then of course, Drummond's the guy that stepped on Caruso's foot just in the middle, like just running down the court together. So, it's the Bulls. That's how it goes. Kings -1.5 at the Pelicans. New Orleans has lost 6 straight home games. They win one of them. They are sitting pretty in the bracket right now, but they have lost all 6 of them. Zion Williamson, man, that sucks. Zion was awesome. Zion was having the game of his life in the biggest game of his life. He was taking over. It sure felt like the Pelicans were going to come all the way back and beat the Lakers. We will never know because Zion hurt his hamstring, goes off the court, and the news from Shams is reevaluate in 2 weeks. And given that and Zion's history, again, I kind of have to believe that barring a long run, and maybe even still then, I think we're probably done with Zion for the season. So Pelicans swept the season series 5-0. I don't know how much that matters here with Zion out necessarily, but you are on a prop again for this one. You're going at the Kings prop here.
Yeah, so I'm going with Keon Ellis. You mentioned it in the beginning. He was Mr. Play-In. He had an absolutely awesome game against the Warriors. That building was electric. He was feeding into it, feeding off of it, doing everything. And this might seem, so his points, rebounds, assists number that I'm suggesting 16.5. At first blush, that seems kind of crazy. He averaged basically 5, 2, and 2 for the season. So, is this an overreaction to one game? No. So what happened is when Malik Monk went out nine games ago, Keon Ellis and Davion Mitchell were kind of both given the opportunities to fill that role. Even in those final 9 games where the two of them were kind of splitting it, this is basically exactly what Keon averaged. He had to average about 10, 5, and 2. Right in that world. Now we see a game last night in which he got the lion's share of the minutes. So 38 minutes. He put up 15 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists. And in these type of games, it absolutely is one of those where Mike Brown's going to ride the hot hand, and he should. And so for me, I like this over, but I also like playing an escalator on this, if you will, because I think if he's playing well again, he is going to continue to get those minutes, and he's going to get the chance to do that to start because he had such a good game against the Warriors. So if if there's some out there and you're sprinkling into a same game, sometimes it's a little hard to find straight escalators on points, rebounds, and assists. But I like the over 16.5 flat because I think he has the edge on Davion to start the game. I think he's a really good fit to potentially throw on CJ McCollum, who has kind of turned into the Pelicans' top scorer here, the top scoring option with Ingram having been on the shelf for a bit and now Zion out as well. So I think he's going to get a lot of minutes. I think he's playing really well. He's clearly got confidence from behind the arc. Let's run it back with Keon Ellis and have him have a good game against the Pelicans as well here.
I love Keon Ellis. He was a guy I enjoyed scouting in college, and then he kind of slipped down draft boards, and I didn't know that he'd really make it. So it's been a cool moment to see him really finding a spot, and I think it certainly seems like establishing a spot in the rotation and at least on the roster going forward. Like Monk and Herter aren't going anywhere, but definitely, like I think honestly, especially for that Warriors matchup, they kind of almost lucked into the Keon Ellis thing so that
Yeah,
he's
they
out there
really did.
to be able to defend Steph. Like they didn't have that guy in the rotation really otherwise. So I think it worked out well that way. I'm going to tiptoe into a side here, even though I don't feel great about it. The vibes for the Pelicans are not great right now. Like all the home losses, they lose the play in, you get the Zion injury. And then don't forget, too, Zion made the comeback with not CJ McCollum and not Brandon Ingram. Those guys rode the pine the entire time down the stretch. Even when Zion gets injured and out in like a tie game, they still don't put Brandon Ingram back in. Now they're back in the starting lineup, I assume, right? Like a couple days later, you got to go out and play, and hey, you're the stars now because Zion's out, so go do the thing. Like, I don't love that. That said, I'm going to carefully take a little bit of action on Pelicans first half here, basically just riding the season long trends. Pelicans first half on the season, plus 10.5. Number 2, home first halves even better, plus 12.4 net rating. The thing I like about the matchup for New Orleans here is that they've just got a lot of dudes to throw at De'Aaron Fox. Like Fox is the guy, he's the best player in this game with Zion out very clearly to me. And we saw how good he's been in playoff settings. But to have all those options that they have to just keep sending waves of defenders at Fox, to me, unless this team is just vibed out and they're done and on 1-2-3 Cancun, and they might be, but I'm hoping Willie Green wants to keep his job. I'm hoping that the guys want to show up. And I'm not willing to buy in for an entire game. That's why I'm only on the half here. But Pelicans first halves have been, a bucket all season long. Not great even the last few games. So maybe we're done here. So that's want to just do a little bit here. But I think Pelicans first half. What do you think? Can we get over the line at least for half with this team?
Pelicans first half has been one of my favorite bets all year, so I definitely cannot argue there. I do lean towards the Sacramento side of things, in part because I've seen nothing from the Pelicans to suggest to me that they are up for a big game at any moment. And ironically, when that happens with teams a lot, I feel like we go to the coach. I actually don't necessarily know if it's the coach. I do think sometimes you can put that on a star player as well. So I wonder if, without their star player, who has at times gotten a bad rep for, he played outstanding against Lakers for sure, but he's not the leader type of, he's not Draymond Green type of leader for sure. I do wonder if, it is a different vibe in a big game this time without their, theoretically without their best player, but maybe there is a different juju. We've seen the Pelicans depth all for this whole iteration of the Pelicans the last couple of years has been their biggest strength. So having to cover Zion maybe isn't as big a deal in that sense, because they do have, such good bench play that they can slot in. Now, maybe that bench play loses some of its value when it's coming against starters instead of against bench. But overall, the Pelicans are a team that theoretically is great, but I'm with you in that, like, it still is theoretical. And I think this Kings team is solid. And I think they did kind of, you said they kind of lucked into the Keon Ellis being, around for that matchup. They also, like, since Herter and Monk went out, they've had a better net rating. And I think there is a little bit to say about Keon Ellis and the defense he brings to that backcourt. And, Malik Monk and Kevin Herter are great, but they maybe fill it up in the ways that aren't the most efficient. So I lean towards the Kings, but I also don't hate doing a Pels first half, watching it play out, and then coming in on the Kings at half too. Sure. Either way, we're going to the Pelicans often aren't the ones storming back out of nowhere with great metal in the second half. So if the Kings take the first half, you could even add a little bit then at that point. So I think, the Pels first half is a look, but I probably am on the Kings for the game as a whole.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's weird because Zion to me is very clearly the number one player on this team. You and I both think Trey Murphy is actually the second best player on this team, but that's another conversation. The weird thing is taking Zion out of the equation actually makes the team make more sense. I think it's a worse version of a team, but it's like, oh, okay, Brandon Ingram, you're the star now. Do the Brandon Ingram thing. Like, I think that will be a much more comfortable role for him. CJ as the clear number 2 rather than like just waiting for a shot to get up. I think they're almost forced to play more Jonas Valanciunas This is a great matchup for him against Sabonis.
Yeah.
That's another one that Joe Dallaire brought up. I don't mind doing like a Valanciunas over Sabonis under combo. If you look at their head-to-heads, like as an SGP together, I think that can work out well. And so we've seen, I think in a play-in game a few years ago, didn't Valanciunas have like a monster game, just got bucket after bucket and like went old school in the post. So I think New Orleans' ceiling clearly is lower without Zion, but it's possible here there could be almost like a little Ewing theory of like, okay, we understand, like, I don't really like Ingram on the team or CJ or Valanciunas because they don't fit with Zion, who the team should be. But with no Zion there, they suddenly all make a little bit more sense. The team makes a little bit more sense. So, yeah, I wanted to just kind of leave them for dead because the Zion injury, but I do think that they're live here. And I think that should transition us to talk about a little bit about, okay, so one of these teams from each game goes into the first round. That's a Sunday matchup for both of them. Boston is the early game on Sunday at 1 Eastern. I think OKC is the final game on Sunday. So I don't think we're going to spend too long on this. Boston's going to play one of these teams. We don't know if it's going to be the Heat or the Bulls. Neither one of us picked a side. Does Boston even care who they're playing?
When we were prepping for this, we were talking about ways we could save time here and there. I was like, honestly, you can save this for one. I'll give you one word: sweep. Boston. I have not been on their futures all season. Boy, did things break really, really nice for them to have, Butler out for the Heat. A Butler-less Heat is still going to be annoying, but I don't think there's any chance. I wouldn't even pick them to win a game against Boston, to be honest. And then that Cavs Magic series, I love the Magic probably more than almost anyone who is not living in Orlando right now. But even I am like, that broke about as perfectly for Boston as they could have imagined. So I don't see having to dive too deep here. I will say Chicago actually has been the better team against top 10 teams this year. The Heat they're 5-20 in the regular season against top 10 teams. So, there is a little bit of that Heat culture. They turn on the postseason, but there's a lot of signs that even if they were healthy, they really weren't going to do a whole lot unless they, really flip the switch to a degree, even beyond past seasons when they got all their shooting luck as well. So if I am Boston, I have the game on in the background and I'm not too stressed about which way it goes.
Yeah, to me, this is what I basically say. The Celtics don't care, but no, the Celtics do care, but they're not scared. The Celtics don't want the Heat because they are a pain in the rear to have to play 4 games and get rid of them. And you never know. Like, you never know how the threes bomb and who hits and whatever.
Well,
like,
all those Bam Adebayo moving screens, you want to avoid those.
Right. Yeah, and frankly, sorry to Heat fans, but look, a lot of dudes get injured against that team in the playoffs.
Exactly.
I'm just saying. So, rather not have to play the Heat. You're going to beat the Bulls. You're going to beat the Heat too, but I think you just don't want the Heat. You don't like we saw against Philly. I don't want them. I want game 1, Boston. These teams play Friday night, and Miami just played a grueling long game. Now they're playing Wednesday night, Friday night. 39 hours later, you're in Boston for tip-off. I don't remember normally this happening where it's the game 1 matchup, or it's like the noon Central Time in my head tip-off. So I think that just sets up Boston is the way better team. And as far as sweep, that's what I came up with for this as well. And traditionally, I don't pick Boston sweeps because this is a team that normally screws around and gives a game away. They did just last year against Atlanta. I gave them no preview on this Bucket podcast that we did. And then Atlanta took, I think, 2 games, actually, if I remember right. And in hindsight, maybe that should have told us a little something. I think Boston knows that's their perception. And I think this is a different version of the team. And I think because of that, I actually like sweep more. I think they're going to want to go ahead and take care of business. Do you have a number that you like a sweep to, a betting number?
No, I should have come with a sweep number. I did not, unfortunately, have that. I'll throw it back to you on that in case you have one in a second. But I will say I love your point on game 1. And I really, we referenced Pelicans earlier as the second best first half team. Celtics have been the best first half team all season. They're absolutely blitzing teams in the first half. So, add in a tight turnaround for either Miami or Chicago and what's going to be probably a double-digit spread. Let's cut it down to that first half and get maybe something like Boston -6.5 or something, and I'll probably like that really, really quite a bit.
Yeah, I like that. You might do the old J Money trifecta spot here also for Boston game 1. My number for Boston sweep is anything plus 225 or longer, which is an absurdly short number for a sweep. But that's the number I came up with, especially because heat culture or not, I think either one of these teams down 3-0 just totally lets go of the rope in game 4, and that's that. And so that helps out a lot to not really have to play the fourth game and have that as a near 100% in my projection. So I will be playing that. I'm certain that they will not price that shorter than plus 225. All right, the other one out west actually is, I think, quite interesting. You and I were chatting before we came on. Oklahoma City, they're the 1 seed. They're not who we thought was going to be the 1 seed this year. Hey, where are the Grizzlies in the playoffs? Can't find them on my list here. Sorry about that. So we got Kings or Pelicans. I think this one has a lot more to say here. We won't get too far into it because we don't know which team it will be. Who do you think the Thunder prefer that it is?
I think the Thunder will much prefer it to be the Kings, and I think we align on why. I think the baseline 50th percentile outcome for if in a series for the Thunder against either of these two teams is going to have the Thunder moving on. However, I think the ceiling of a Pelicans versus the ceiling of a Thunder is a lot closer than the ceiling of the Thunder versus the ceiling of the Kings. If all cylinders are clicking for both teams, the Pelicans just provide so many more options on the wings to really throw at guys. They just have a better roster than the Kings, to be honest. Kings do have that top end talent, but the Pelicans would scare me a lot more. But I think either way, to be honest, I'm going to be pretty heavily on the Thunder. I really like this Thunder team. I really like the way the bracket broke for them as well. I'm a little bit lower on the 4 or 5 seeds there as well. The big thing I was always skeptical on about the Thunder wasn't necessarily the rebounding or necessarily the inexperience. The Slam and Jam podcast, one of my favorite podcasts out there, they kind of debunked a few of those. They're 2 Thunder guys, so of course they had to debunk the rebounding myth. But what I was worried about was it seemed like a team screaming for shooting regression. And so here's the really interesting thing. So I'm going to read some numbers for a second. You and I love numbers, so apologies in advance to it's probably going to be a very numbersy episode here. But here's the 3-point shooting numbers for 4 different players, 4 of the top 5 3-point shooters on the Thunder. First half, I'm going to use All-Star break as the half point, and then second half. So Isaiah Joe went from 42.7 to 39.7. Shea went from 37.1 to 31.9. J-Dub, 45.3 to 37.8. Chet, 39.3 to 32.5. Those are very noticeable drops among 4 of their 5 biggest shooters. Here's the really weird thing. Their team net rating in the first half was plus 7.2. In the second half, plus 7.9. They got better somehow while dealing with a Shea injury and all of their shooters not making shots. And this is a team that I think just has a lot of answers right now. They're kind of like a good version of the Pelicans, to be honest, because they have all this optionality. They have a great coach who's likely to win Coach of the Year. They do not have the experience for sure. But the big thing I was scared about was getting that shooting regression. It came, and they were able to deal with it and still win. And I think the other big thing about this is getting that 1 seed. Shooters in the playoffs get a little bit tight anyways. They get even tighter when on the road. So keeping that home court advantage now throughout the entire Western Conference, potentially, this is a team I'm really high on. I do think that either way, I'm going to be looking at them. But if I'm, leveraging myself on Thunder, I want to see Sacramento win on Friday. Pelicans, I start to get a little more nervous just because the ceiling of a Pelicans theoretical ceiling is so tempting to buy into, and it can come around. A couple of things break, and that is a scary team for sure.
Yeah, I ended up similar to where you're at, but I'm a little bit even heavier on the Pelicans here. My first thought was, okay, I think you don't want to play the Kings. We talked earlier about how the Kings have between these two teams, Kings and Pelicans, with Zion out, Kings have the best player. De'Aaron Fox can go win a game in the playoffs. We've seen him do that last year. Honestly, if I'm being honest, even with my Warriors fandom, I think De'Aaron Fox probably wins them the series against the Warriors if he's not hurt last year. That's how good that he was. So you don't want any part of that. And I don't believe that Brandon Ingram or Valanciunas can be that guy for the Pelicans. So there's that. The Kings are the number 1 defensive rebounding team. And then I think that we're going to see, if it's that matchup, just a ton of threes both ways. That's how both defenses can line up and everything. And that's just shot variance. And now it's like, well, who made the shots? Did OKC's regress off of their shooting? Did Sacramento hit their shots? They're missing some of their shooters, so maybe not as good there. Did Fox just go off for a game? again, I'm not super scared of that matchup for OKC. You can see where some of the variance could play in. So I was like, all right, maybe let's just avoid that. Let's take the Pelicans. They're the low ceiling team. But the Pelicans are like the outlier team. They're the weird wonk team that, as I kind of go through and I do my 4 factors and my big picture overview, this is the team that, like, every time I did that early in the year, All-Star break, coming to the playoffs, of all 30 teams, this is the team I least have a handle on. Like, I don't understand what's happening with the Pelicans, to the point that there's weird things that they do consistently well that you're not supposed to be able to do well. And I'm like, well, I guess Willie Green's a really good coach. Like, something's happening, because 2 years in a row now, the Pelicans have allowed a huge number of 3-point attempts defensively, by design, probably, but they are 2 years in a row the number 1 defense against 3-point percentage. You're not supposed to be able to do that. That is like a proven statistical randomness thing, 3-point shooting defense. We saw it happen with the Brad Stevens Celtics for a bunch of years in there. I don't know what it was. Maybe he's friends with Brad and figured out what they're doing over there in New Orleans now. But, like, OKC, number 1 shooting 3-pointers. Pelicans, number 1 shooting defense 3-pointers. I already think the shooting thing's a red flag, kind of like you do. So could that possibly be a way to start shutting down the offense a little bit? I mentioned in the Friday night game, Pelicans have a lot of guys to throw at De'Aaron Fox. Well, guess what? They're going to throw all those guys at Shea also. And I have some real questions about some of the guys down the line on this OKC team. I don't think Josh Giddey is going to necessarily be a playoff guy. I'm not sure if Lou Dort is ready to be what I want him to be in a series like this, let's just say, to take less of the shots, to stay on the court in that way. I know his shooting percentage went up this year, but let's see it now in the playoffs. If some of those guys are getting bothered by the Pelicans defenders, and now they're coming out of the rotation maybe a little bit, now the depth really becomes an issue, because the Pelicans have a lot of those guys off the bench keep coming in waves. Pelicans, we talked about the first half thing. They are 28-14 on the road this year, second to only Boston. So there's another weird quirk about them. That doesn't make any sense. Outside of the top 3 in the West, they have the best record against 500 teams or better. That's another weird thing. I don't get it. I don't know why any of these numbers are the case. They just are the case. So I like, they're top 10 on offense and defense on the season. And that's really not relevant, because that includes Zion. But it's a weird, quirky team that I'm going to take it a little further than you. And I'm a little lower in OKC than you are, I think, as well. Or perhaps more to say, I have some more concerns about them. I think the Pelicans would be live in a series. I think I don't have a number for it, but I suspect I would end up being on like a Pelicans plus something, not a Thunder minus something, if we were actually doing a series pick here. I will say I'm looking here to do like an over 5.5 game situation. Like, I just think the series goes long. I think, we've wondered for OKC, what's it going to look like in the playoffs? Is Shea ready to be that guy? Was he going to get tested right away against Herb Jones and it just, Jose Alvarado, all the guys, like just Trey Murphy, all the guys. Yep. He's going to get tested right away. Are Giddey and Dort and those guys ready to go? Is Chet ready? And the style that they play that way. Well, here's Jonas Valanciunas. Like, all the questions we have would get asked right away against the Pelicans. I think they probably find answers, but I think the Pelicans are alive. And one more pick here for you. In the play-in era, is that a thing, a play-in era? In the play-in era, the teams that come out of the play-in and are the 7 and 8 seeds in game 1 against top 2 seeds are 2-4 straight up. So if it's the Pelicans, not the Kings, if it's the Pelicans, every year on the first weekend, we get some out of left field weird upset. We get all these short little lines. There's not many choices this year. Give me Pelicans game 1 money line against OKC for the upset. And suddenly it's like, oh man, do we have some Ewing theory? Is OKC the 1 seed? What's going to happen? I think they'd right the ship probably, but I think Pelicans live for game 1 money line. I know I went it further there than you did, but what do you think about the game 1 angle?
No, I mean, the Pelicans are a team that their ceiling is always something I am going to be in on. And I almost wonder if it's, the Joe Delaire from last night where he was like, if you want to be on the Sixers, be in on the Sixers and look to the conference. Like, if the Pelicans get over their ability to kind of crap themselves in big games, their ceiling is as high as almost anyone. And again, I'm kind of low on that 4-5 matchup. The Pelicans have the talent to compete with either of those teams. Now it sounds like Kawhi is coming back. That is a big thing. If he is truly back and healthy, I'm on your side of being much higher on the Clippers and the Mavs in that series, and I would be on the Clippers against Pelicans. But again, if New Orleans is reaching its theoretical ceiling, there's not a whole lot of teams out there that are easily better than them. So if we see something like a game 1 victory, now they're also notorious at losing it too. So they're just a hard team to pin down, but I do love the theoretical ceiling of the Pelicans for sure. I just have come around on the Thunder a little bit. And I think probably the biggest differentiator, because I actually have questions about Shea as well as like a true, lead the team to the finals superstar. I think Jalen Williams is like kind of quietly one of the better second players in the league. And I think he's ready for every moment that is going to come his way. And he'll really, I think he could be the breakout player of the postseason.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. He definitely has been another one of the most improved player candidates this year. Can't win, of course, because we would never get to a sophomore. Can't do that. But yeah, he's been great. He's going to be in the spotlight, I think, in this series because, with Shea getting all the attention, I think I'm with you really on looking at how the bracket shapes up. It's just for me, my angle is that's why I want either the Clippers or Mavs. Once I get a feel for who I'm definitely in on that series, because I think OKC is maybe vulnerable here, then I think that sets up for a next series where I'm going to probably like Clippers or Mavs, either one that goes forward. And then you're in the Western Conference Finals. I'm not totally convinced that Denver is the exact right heavy favorite that they're being pictured at. We're way too far down the line now on all this stuff, but I think that's interesting there. Well, let me recap a little bit what we came up with here. So Boston sweep, take the sweep for the Celtics. We like game 1 against whoever they play, possibly just the first half if you prefer. Pelicans and Kings. We think that the OKC against the Kings, it sounds like, we didn't say this, but it sounds like both of us would probably be on like an OKC -1.5 or something. Like, I feel like they take care of the Kings relatively comfortably. Pelicans, varying degrees of concern here that they could possibly give some trouble there. And I like the game 1 bet. Jim, remind me of your Friday night play-in best bets.
Yeah, I have Jaime Jaquez over 16.5 points plus assists, and I have Keon Ellis over 16.5 points, rebounds, and assists.
And I have Kobe White on the escalator. Give me the threes over 2.5, and then 4 and 5. You got it. And give me the Pelicans lightly in the first half. Get my money and get out of there before I have to see if they blow another home game. That is going to wrap it up for this episode. We are just all over your feeds with buckets. I don't even know when all these are coming out and which order. So Jim and I are on the 2 versus 7 series preview, which we're about to record shortly. Perhaps you've listened to it already. If not, listen to it next. We've got those game 1 and best bets for the series episodes coming from the entire Buckets crew. Like our whole cadre of guys are coming on and giving out their picks. Lots and lots of stuff for you. Lots of action coming this weekend. I believe we will maybe have a Sunday night live Buckets to be able to recap the games that we've watched. And then, of course, back all throughout next week and throughout the playoffs, giving out our best bets, our game-to-game previews. We'll update futures and whatnot along the way. And yeah, that's it. That's it for this episode. We'll see you next time. Let's get buckets.